Guillermo Mash for the January 25th Without a Roof radio program here on KZFR 90.1 FM. My distinct pleasure to actually have on the line from Sacramento, California, Cathleen Williams, and she represents Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee, and she's going to give a little insight on that. But I know, Kathleen, you do have some ties into some legal services down there in Sacramento, and you actually won a pretty big lawsuit against the city of Sacramento in the county back in 2011, 2012. Did you not?
That's right. It was really an unprecedented case. We must have had 20 homeless people testifying, and we created a higher moral ground because the Constitution does protect property. It may not protect the right to rest or the right for shelter or even education, but it does protect property. And so where the police are confiscating and discarding property, they are breaking the basic protections in the Constitution under the Fourth Amendment and the Due Process Clause under the 14th Amendment. So the Constitution can be important when you are dealing with the abusive conduct of the police on the street.
I think it was for like $500,000 for our listeners. Just trying.
It was. Yeah. It was more.
More. There you go.
We had a claims procedure, and people came in and had to, file a claim, and then they were compensated. It was great. It also was a great organizing vehicle, which is why we originally brought the case.
So maybe a little bit about your background, Cathleen Williams, for the legal services that you do in Sacramento, and then to kind of segue into SHOC, which we're going to be talking about, Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee.
Well, I've been an attorney for more years than I would like to state. I've done a lot of labor law. In these years, I'm working with Mark Marin, who's a well-known civil rights attorney down here in Sacramento and happens to be my husband. And I am continuing to work, but mostly around civil rights. And SHOC, the Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee, I call it my political home, and it's other people's political home as well. And by that I mean it's a place and it's a group where you can go, and the things that you really care about and that are being threatened now can be advanced and defended and understood. So homeless people with their vulnerability are at the heart of something that's unfolding in this country. So I feel very privileged to be part of SHOC. I'd like to see SHOC-type organizations spring up everywhere, like Chico. You could call it Chico Homeless Organizing Committee. Be pronounced the same, but it would be a little different C. It would be CHOC. But what it is, it's a group that meets weekly. And that's very important. We have a real rhythm and commitment. And our mission is to amplify the voice of homeless people so that we are heard. And we have an influence on the various laws and practices that are creating this tremendous harm. So we work around housing. We work with the Sacramento Housing Alliance, who is our fiscal sponsor. We work around civil rights, protection of people on the street. We are at the city council. We are in the legislature. And we also read and study and discuss so that we can see what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, it's been my real pleasure over the years. It's been about a year since I've been, but I've been to 3 or 4 of your meetings. It was fun to be over time, so it's over a 2-year, 3-year period. And I would say for our listeners, the thing that really, it all impressed me, but it was so impressive to see the voices of the homeless folks, kind of landing for as long as you needed to let people vent and talk and get their issues out. But the coolest one was the last one I was there, where there was a whole kind of session around, what are we going to say at city council tonight? Maybe you've got some good memories around those kind of talks, because those were really, really cool. Yes. People got excited. They had something that they were working towards that same evening.
Right. Well, we've really focused on the repeal or amendment of our what's called our anti-camping ordinance, which criminalizes sleeping on the street. In other words, it is a crime to lay your head down in Sacramento. And when I've deposed the police officers who are responsible for this, they said, if you want to lay a coat down, just sleep for a couple hours, we probably won't bother you, but you can't have a tent. So we're really looking at survival issues. We're really looking at, can you make it through the winter? Can you make it through the summer with the insects and the drought? And we, as you know, Bill, we just had someone die.
Yeah, I saw it.
A homeless person die at City Hall. There's an overhang. There's kind of a way that there's a portico. That person was resting there, and some people went to check and said, he's not breathing. So this is an example of the toll that it takes on our communities. This is the cost of homelessness, and the social costs are extreme. We have no bathrooms. It's actually looked upon as something that's not necessary because the idea is to force homeless people further underground, further out of town. And as you know, later in this week, there'll be the homeless count, where groups will be going out and participating in counting people. So that will happen on the 25th, so that's going to be happening all over the country. And, homelessness ticks up, ticks down, but the overall trend from the rising rents, from the profound unemployment that is really a result of changes in the economy where, you could work in fast food, but the kinds of jobs that we used to have are simply gone, and that is reflected in automation. So we really try to talk to people about these are the factors. It's not your fault. It's not like the 1 million people in this country who are homeless. It's not that it's their fault. Of course, some may have fallen by the wayside. Some may be mentally ill. Some may have turned to drugs or substances to get by. But how can you say that 1 million people living outside isn't a social condition that is created because the government that we elected is not looking after our community and saying, we need some public housing. We need some subsidized housing. In fact, New York, as you probably know, has launched a new program of subsidized housing. So we are asking the community and the government at every level to start looking at homelessness as a social condition that is reflecting big changes in our economy. Big changes.
There was a lot of talk at our last city council meeting and in the lead up, and there's this catchphrase, political will. And I wanted to stop real quick on what it takes for political will, as I've seen here in Chico, elsewhere, and what communities are successful. And really, there's like 3 key things. One, we talked about homeless community, their voices and in their engagement. But there's also this real critical need. We've talked about this a little bit, civil and human rights, legal services, connecting people that have cases in standing, and faith community. So what would you add about getting the faith community involved and maybe a little bit more around the legal services and the importance of standing up for people's rights and maybe filing lawsuits?
With the lawsuit question, the first step is to reach that community and bring them together, because you can go to small claims court, but the most effective thing is going to be a class action. So to do that, there has to be a lot of organization to bring people into contact. And so the first step is not usually just filing the lawsuit. The first step is doing the outreach to find out, who is in that community that is having their property taken or is being abused by the police. That's the first step. Now, the faith community plays a very important role at a lot of different levels. In Sacramento, for example, work with the county to open churches on these terrible weather nights. So it's a combined effort. But I think that the faith community can be reached because what we're trying to create is a new moral center where people are not just looking away or accepting this level of dehumanization and hardship. And this is going to be very important now with the election and the rise of a really openly fascist ideology that devalues human life and elevates corporate power. But we're going to see the safety net in tatters. And that's why we have to come back with a strong moral message that this is not acceptable. And you may or may not know this has already started in North Carolina over a period of years. And Reverend Barber has started the moral movement and the Moral Mondays, and tens of thousands of people in North Carolina have been out on the streets. So we bring all these forces together and energize them with a vision that human rights are a moral imperative.
And it builds a stronger and more healthy community for certain. I did have a nice follow-up with Paula Lamazzi about the idea of, if we're going to start our own little shock
very good.
Here in Chico. And she really liked the whole idea of having formerly homeless folks, putting together a little page that we would submit, maybe 1,500 words a month. and get some of those papers up here. So what would you say towards the whole, the street journal that you've been such a big part of and such a writing force, and, how you see that impacting the will and the way here on the streets of Chico when we get them up here?
Oh, great. Okay. Well, it has two sides, and, it's an international phenomenon, and there's an organization that works internationally to support what are called street newspapers. So it has two parts. One is what we call micro enterprise. It is a way to make money on the street, and in a way that is very beneficial to the public. So our folks, our vendors or distributors, pay 10 cents a paper, and then they can sell it from anywhere from $1 to $5, and that actually can create a pretty decent income stream. We have hundreds of distributors per year. At any one time, we probably have 30, probably a core of about 15 or 20 that sell it every month. So that's very key. But the other thing about essentially a community newspaper is you can bring people together as they read these articles about the situation, what is impacting the people who are homeless, what the latest news is. But actually, we covered the Fight for 15, we cover immigration. Obviously, we're going to be covering the marches that just happened around the inauguration. And we see ourselves as a community and movement paper, so that's very beneficial. I mean, I love the Sacramento News and Review. I think they've done a really good job, but we can be more focused, and our pages, we try to fill them with poetry. We have a cartoonist. We're building a group of writers who can bring their experiences, just the day-to-day struggle and human interest side of being homeless, and, uplift the community around that and build that support.
Uplift and inform. I'm really looking forward to working with you folks on that because, I've submitted articles to Homeward and other street newspapers, and it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, 60 seconds to kind of land and tell City Council. This is a message for City Council from Cathleen Williams in Sacramento, California. What would you say to City Council, Chico, California?
Call upon the community to unite around the need to protect homeless people. That could involve establishing a safe place for people to camp. It could involve opening up public spaces, warehouses, and other areas where people can be protected. It can be working with service providers. It can be making sure that people know that just because you're poor, really poor, just because you've struggled in your life and are physically disabled or mentally ill or even addicted in some way, that doesn't mean you're less than a valuable and precious human being, and for the religious, a child of God.
I really appreciate that, Cathleen Williams. I know we'll be speaking more as the months and years go by, and it's just it's just a pleasure to know that we've got such strong people down in Sacramento helping our folks experiencing poverty, the worst form of violence.
Yes, a treat for me too, Phil. Thanks so much for calling.